I will introduce myself. First, I would like to say I'm so excited to be here. Yay for Earth Day, the 51st Earth Day. So it's an honor to be here with everybody to celebrate Earth Day. And it's a huge honor to be here with one of my heroes, Lois Gibbs. And right before this talk, I pulled off from my shelf her book that I read in college. And it has been formative and foundational for me. So it's an honor to be here with you, Lois, talking about environmental disasters. So I'm a pediatrician with a background in environmental health, a degree in health policy. I am also a professor at Michigan State University. I currently run an initiative in Flint, Michigan called the Pediatric Public Health Initiative to mitigate the impact of the Flint water crisis and to make sure that there's no more Flints anywhere else. Lois.
Hi, I'm Lois Gibbs, and I am also excited to be here for the 51st Earth Day, and obviously with one of my heroes as well. I mean, it really shows you that, people of all walks of life joining together, a pediatrician with a housewife, organizing together, we can change the world, and that's what we have done collectively. So for those who don't know me, I am from Love Canal in Niagara Falls, New York. Love Canal was a toxic waste, is still actually a toxic waste dump with 20,000 tons of chemicals in the center of the community that leaked out into my neighborhood. And behind me are all the children who wanted out, and they were protesting. We did a lot of protesting. We were the first site that was actually recognized as an environmental disaster due to pollution. And as a result of that, we not only got relocated 800 families, but also a federal law called the Superfund law was enacted, was passed, and that Superfund is for sites all across the country that pose a huge environmental or public health risk. So it sort of took care of the love canals of the following, tomorrows, I guess. And after Love Canal, I founded the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice, and that's located just outside of DC. And it has reached our 40th birthday, so I'm really excited about that. And what we do is we work with communities all across the country who are faced with an environmental health risk and public health problems. So like Woburn, Massachusetts, or Flint, Michigan, or name the pollution thing that you know of, and we've probably been there. Thanks.
Thank you. And Lois and Mona, give me a heads up that you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm just hopping in super quickly because I think Arielle's having some connectivity problems, obviously. But thank you for those intros, and thank you for vamping. You guys are really pros. I'm sure you've done a lot of these in the virtual era. So tell us a bit about what are the sort of takeaways that you feel like people should know about environmental disasters that, people hear the headlines, people read about this stuff, but it's typically only when the thing happens and it really captures national headlines. One of the things that I compare it to all the time is with the first Earth Day. One of the things that really inspired the first Earth Day was the Cuyahoga River fire. Mm-hmm. But few people know that fire actually caught on fire all the time. And it's just when it made the headline that it actually made national news. People turned out for Earth Day. It was a major thing. Mm-hmm. But what would you like people to understand beyond the headlines about environmental disasters like the ones that you all have really focused on? Mona, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And actually, that's why I'm really so excited to be here. Flint made really big headlines. We were international news for quite some time. It wasn't the first environmental disaster, and it hasn't been the last environmental disaster. And my take-home message is that there are crises probably as egregious as Flint happening all over this country that have not garnered national attention. So you think about Flint, you're like, oh, that's that crazy story about that one city in that one state surrounded by the Great Lakes that had brown water. That can't happen anywhere else. We have better laws and we have better protections, and that's impossible. And what I want everybody to take home is that, yes, these kinds of things, be it air quality, water quality, climate crisis, are happening all all over. And I think what I learned from Lois and what I've learned from so many giants before me is that we have to open our eyes to these environmental problems. And more importantly, we have to take action. And when we do take collective action, we can finally put a spotlight on these issues that are happening in our own backyard, but also disproportionately in vulnerable communities, and try to fix them.
Yeah. And I guess from my perspective, Josh, is that a couple things. One is that most of these problems are actually in communities that are of low wealth and communities of color or indigenous peoples. And that's not by mistake, that's actually by design. And you know that when we're talking about Flint, or we're talking about Love Canal, or we're talking about Tucson, Arizona, we're really talking about innocent people by no fault of their own. That was the only place they could buy homes. Or in the South, it was the first place, the first area in which African Americans were allowed to actually purchase property. And then the industry grows around them and the pollution grows around them. And society has accepted that as okay. So, you know, it's not okay. And it's happening, it does happen in white communities and wealthy communities, but rarely. And if it does, it gets cleaned up immediately, where Flint had went on forever before anybody actually took Mona or other people seriously. And then the second part is that when you have a flood or a hurricane or a tornado or, you know, some natural disaster, at the end of it, you could just clean it up and count your losses. You know, you've lost your home, or you lost your car, or you lost your favorite tree, or, you know, or so-and-so passed away, and that was really sad. In an environmental disaster, the impacts of it go on for decades and decades. We're talking about being exposed to things like cancer, and it takes 20 years for cancer to show its ugly head. We are talking about innocent children who are born, especially the girls, are born with their eggs in their bodies already that could be exposed in utero or in their toddlerhood. And, you know, when they decide they're going to have a child, they need to think about their exposure. So it's really has really long tentacles to it that touches people's lives. It doesn't go away when it's gone away. When you move out, you haven't moved away.
Yeah. Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, in Flint, we had lots of environmental contamination, even pre-existing to our water crisis, but the water crisis really, heralded a population level lead exposure. It's a neurotoxin. And in pediatrics, we call it a silent assassin because we don't see its consequences right away. It manifests years, if not decades, if not generations later, like so many other environmental contaminants. So after those TV cameras and the media crews are gone, we still have to deal with these long-term consequences and support those impacted communities.
Yeah. And I think I like a lot of the things that you touched on there in terms of the environmental justice issues, just the fact that a lot of these things in your communities, you really know those things. You used the phrase assassin, silent assassin, I think is what you said, but that only gets really communicated, in the rare occasions. It's more the exception, that kind of thing. I think we do also have Arielle on. So I do want to welcome Arielle back. I think her connectivity issues maybe got resolved. We'll just give her a second to come back. There we go.
Oh gosh, I am so sorry. I left you hanging. I'm hoping that the Wi-Fi is working a little bit better now, but thank you so much, John, for taking the lead and asking these women to start and explain everything that they've been working on over these years. I am such a huge fan of both of you and the work that you've been doing to protect families and to protect everyone from these huge disasters. I'm curious, I know we only have a few minutes left, and you guys have been talking a lot about what you went through. Is there any way that people can start to educate themselves on what they should be doing moving forward in terms of, how to not be giving money to these companies that are putting so much toxic chemicals in their stuff? Like, how do people educate themselves?
I think there's a lot. I'll take the first bite at it and you can have the second one, Mona. There's a lot of ways. I mean, you can go on websites of many of the environmental groups, including our own, which is chej.org, and learn about it. But you just need to think about, what are you doing? So when you go to your takeout, because we're all doing takeout now, right?
Yeah.
And then you have styrofoam. It's like, what are you doing? Don't eat at that restaurant if the takeout is styrofoam, because what is styrofoam? it is a toxic product. And someone, and I will tell you exactly who, someone in Louisiana lives by that factory, because there's only one factory that's making that styrofoam, and they have birth defects and reproductive problems. And so you as a consumer can seriously impact what happens in communities, because when the product is no longer needed, the industry will find a new product. They will make that substitute. And if it's safer for the workers and the plants, it's safer for you too.
So I would add, there's a lot that you can do as a consumer, but there's even, I think, more that you can do as a voter, as a civically engaged person. So if you vote and elect policymakers who enforce regulations, who enact stronger regulations, who put into play polluter pay laws in so many states like Michigan, polluters get away with everything. There's no accountability. So we have to do so much more to put into place leaders who value public health, who respect science, and who are governed by preventing problems. Right now, industry has its upper hand. They have a long-standing history of manipulating public health agencies and environmental agencies to minimize regulations and to enhance their bottom line. So we have to open our eyes to kind of that history and who's kind of funding these things, and really put our power with our vote.
That's amazing. Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people, hopefully in the last couple of years, have started to realize how important their votes actually are. And one last question that I have, because you both have kids, and I know how much kids are important to you, I'm wondering, what's one lesson that you would teach your kids that you've learned in regards to activism and what they should do, speak up, or what would you teach them based on what you've learned?
Well, I've taught all of my children that if you see something that isn't right, you should stand up, find out about it, make sure it isn't right, and then speak out about it. And, and that goes for everything. It goes from bullying in the playground to, what's happening at City Hall. If it's not right, stand up and say something. And they have done that, by the way. They're terrific advocates.
So my kids are a little younger, but I love to read them a quote from one of my favorite children's books by another doctor who said, "Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not." So that's by Dr. Seuss from the Lorax. It's something I grew up with, and it's something that I've tried to instill in my children to remind them that they have an amazing power if they choose to stand up and speak up and especially fight for others.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you. And John, do you have one more question?
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate that, Lois, I love that sort of like see something, say something strategy of sort of bringing that to justice issues. So we do a lot at Earth Day Initiative where we talk about being a climate communicator and simply using your voice, and that it really does affect the people around you. And studies show that a lot of times people think that other people don't care about climate justice or climate action, and then they find out later, oh, actually all these people care about it. We just weren't talking about it for so long. We're going to have a segment later that talks a bit about that. Do you all find that generally you are surprised when people do find out about your work, or they find out about some issue in terms of how engaged they do get? I have found that people truly do care, and that has been really inspiring. Like Lois, you gave the example of your kids. It sounds like your kids are very actively involved in this stuff. But what is the reception that you find that people have when you actually when they learn about your work? Mona, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I love that question, and it's one of the reasons that I wrote a book very much for a layperson audience, because as scientists and as academics, we sometimes communicate in very narrow places, and we don't do a good job sharing the benefits of our science to larger, broader audiences. And what I have seen is that people from all disciplines, all walks of life, all political parties, all parts of the country, they care. They care when you tell them the stories, and they care especially when you bring in that human element. And as Lucky mentioned in an earlier segment, they care when you also talk about health, and especially health of children. So as much as we keep talking about that, I've seen that it's resonated with lots of different folks, all kinds of folks.
And I found the same thing. I think the best example is when you go door to door before the pandemic, and you knocked on doors. Almost every single time, someone would say, "I've been waiting for somebody to come to my door and tell me what to do." So, there is a lot of people out there, they do care. They're not sure what to do. And I think our job as educators and communicators is to provide those easy, simple things to plug people in. And then once they get in, they grow and flourish and the movement becomes so much stronger. But door knocking is the thing that I find every single time. I've yet to knock on doors in a neighborhood that at least one person didn't say, "I've been waiting for somebody to come to my door and talk to me about this."
I love that. That is so important because so many people want a leader to show up and they don't know that they can be that leader. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions that we want to touch on, John, or do we need to wrap?
I think we are out of time, but I don't even know that we got to introduce you because we had the issues at the beginning. Broadway Green Alliance was so generous with helping set us up with some folks from the entertainment industry. And it does touch to the points that we're talking about. Mona, you had said, sometimes your work can be very siloed and it's difficult to communicate these concepts. What we're trying to do here is bring sort of like high profile talent who's very good at communicating to the broader public and shine that spotlight, and then shine it on the work of these awesome experts and activists here. So Arielle, introduce yourself really quick.
Yes, hi, I'm Arielle Jacobs. I play Jasmine in Aladdin on Broadway. I'm also a captain of the Broadway Green Alliance, which is a fantastic organization that takes members of the Broadway companies and educates them on the best green practices and kind of lets everybody know what they can do to take care of the planet. And in the Broadway community, there's a lot of people who care. So I think it's a fantastic organization that can kind of focus all of our energies into that direction.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.